Evening all, thanks for stopping by. I'm here tonight with a very special bottle of beer, which needless to say I'm very excited about because I always am. I've got a bottle here of Rooster's Brewing Baby-Faced Assassin. Now this is a really interesting beer for a whole bunch of reasons. It's one of 70 bottles. It's a hand production, hand bottle thing. This is bottle number 62 of 70. And I'm really excited about it for a whole bunch of reasons. One is that Beeritz, the shop that I part own in Leeds, gets a mention on the label. It says Baby-Faced Assassin was conceived as a homebrew recipe in the back office of Beeritz in Headingley, Leeds, on a dark winter's afternoon in early 2011. So the guy who brewed this beer, well, there are two guys who are kind of associated with it, Tom Fozzard and his brother Oliver. They now are they have stewardship, I guess. They are slowly taking over Rooster's Brewery, which has been purchased from Sean and Alison Franklin. The Rooster's Brewery are a micro just outside of Harrogate in Yorkshire. And when I was thinking about sort of the history of Rooster's Brewing, what suddenly occurred to me was I remember reading about them years and years ago in this Michael Jackson's Pocket Beer book, which is no longer in print, but this is the 1997 edition. And it actually affords Roosters just one single line, and I think it's an interesting line. In Harrogate, the Rooster Micro is noted for hoppy ales, sometimes varietal, which is interesting because Sean Franklin has kind of carved a real name for himself as somebody who has a great philosophy of beer making. He uses almost predominantly, he produces very pale beers and seeks to get as much hop character, usually varietal hop character, into his beers as possible. He's got a beautiful way of explaining that. What he says is that pale malt is a blank canvas onto which the hop character can be projected. So the malt is really just there to lend body for the hop characters to be displayed on, which I think is an interesting sort of starting point. I mean, like a lot of breweries, I guess if you're going to take dogma to its illogical conclusion, it actually doesn't become very interesting. And actually, Roosters produce a whole load of beers across the whole colour spectrum. But as a starting point, I think that's an interesting philosophy. And actually, Baby-Faced Assassin is that philosophy perhaps taken to its conclusion, because what it is, it's an exercise in what you might call extreme late hopping. Certainly the homebrew version. When Tom and I were talking it through, Tom came up with the recipe. And we were talking about how to get lots and lots of hop character into your beers. And what we were doing, we were reading a lot of homebrewing books, and Tom's a very keen homebrewer. He knows much more about it than I do. But what he came up with the idea of was, in order to sort of hit your target IBUs, you put hops in early in the beer. As you boil the beer, the earlier the hops go in, the more bitterness they lend. The later you add them, the more flavour and aroma they give. And so Tom came up with the idea to pack more flavour and aroma in. Rather than adding hops at the start of the boil for bitterness, you add them later in the boil, but just use more of them. And so what happens, the later in the boil you get, the more hops you need to add to get the requisite bitterness to balance the sweetness and the body of the beer. And so what Tom came up with, and I forget exactly, I'm laughing because we'll take this idea to its illogical conclusion in a second. But the idea Tom came up with was start adding hops really, really late in the boil, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and you have to use hundreds of grams to hit your requisite bitterness, but at the same time you're extracting so much flavour and aroma that it almost defies belief. And so this is actually, or the original version, I haven't tried this yet, was a beer made with 100% Citra, just all added very, very late in the boil. And the resultant homebrew was one of the most exciting beers I've ever drunk. It was so full of hop character. And that's the nice thing about homebrewing, is that a lot of the time, there are no commercial considerations. To scale up that kind of amount of hops is not commercially feasible. So that's the great thing about homebrewing, is you can make beers that are just commercially unviable but taste absolutely fantastic. The reason I was laughing just now is that I know that Tom has taken the whole late hopping thing to its illogical conclusion. He recently brewed a 20-litre batch of beer and added 400 grams of hops at 1 minute before the end of the boil. Now I haven't tried it, and I hope Tom doesn't mind me telling everybody out there about it. But if that comes out and it turns out to be a balanced, drinkable beer. The hop character in it is going to be sensational. It can't be scaled up for commercial use. It's just not feasible. But 400 grams of Chinook 1 minute before flame out. Anyway, that's a bit of the history behind this beer. I'm really excited to try it. This was produced as it would be belittling it to call it a promotional tool, but it's not a commercial release. It was given away to I guess 70 people, or maybe 62 people, and then they're drinking the other 8 bottles themselves. Enough talk, let's get into it. This is the moment of truth. Oh, big pop! And it's going to be a little bit hazy, I guess, because I've been waving it about quite a lot. It's not filtered. And what do we have? Slightly hazy. Lovely sort of golden colour. Big, thick, creamy head. Lovely. And just that, I mean, Citra is an incredible hop. It just gives such tropical and citrus fruit characters. Those aromas really, really leap out of the glass. It's not the full-on attack of the original baby-faced assassin, but God, that smells sensational. That's beautiful. That is just such a wonderfully... In some ways it's a very simple beer, because all it is just pale malt and hops. But just what it does as it passes across the tongue is incredible. As you put the beer up to your mouth, you open your mouth and you breathe in, you get this incredible aroma of kind of tangerines and mangoes, and it hits the palate, the lovely light carbonation, sweetness, carbonation yonks it away from your tongue. You get a really nice combination of sort of bite and sweetness. Across the palate you swallow, you get a big sort of burst of hops as it goes down, and then just right at the end the biscuity malt comes through, loads more mango, tangerine. That's a sensational beer. And the beauty of it is, of course, is that, maybe it's not a beautiful thing, but it will never be released commercially. It's not a viable brew. The level of hopping, maybe it will be, who knows. But I'm really pleased to be drinking this brew again, albeit a slightly rejigged one. Rooster's Brewing, passed into new hands. On the evidence of this, I think there's 2 safe pairs of hands looking after the brewery. Tom, who's the brewery manager, Oliver's the brewer there. That's a really exciting beer to drink. I guess that's their kind of first sort of serious release to try and get some interest going in what's happening at the brewery. And man, I hope they carry on brewing beers like this. And on the evidence of this, there's no reason to think that anything but great things are going to happen to Rooster's Brewing. So, Sean and Alison, thanks very much for all your sterling work over the years, and good luck with the handover to Tom and Oliver. I'm so looking forward to drinking the rest of this, I can barely speak. Cheers now.